A histogram is a graph that you can bring up on the back of your camera. If you have a DSLR, you can have it in your preview or live view, and if you shoot with a mirrorless camera, you can have it on your monitor, in your EVF, or next to the image that you have taken, so basically your preview. In the dictionary, it's defined as an accurate representation of the distribution of numerical data. However, it differs from a bar graph in the sense that a bar graph relates to two variables, but a histogram only relates to one. In photography, the variable is luminance, which is a posh way of saying brightness. Along the bottom of the graph is the range of shades from black to white, and the vertical axis is the percentage of pixels for that given shade. Imagine a series of bins along the graph. These bins relate to how many shades there are in your image. As a photo site records a certain shade and puts it into the image as a pixel, this would also be added to the given bin in the histogram. To keep it simple, let's say you have a 4-bit black and white sensor. With this, there would be 16 shades from black to white. And let's also say that you have 1024 photo sites in your sensor. So a sensor of 32 by 32 pixels. Now this wouldn't make up much of an image, but for each of those photo sites, they would record one of those 16 shades from black to white whenever you took a photograph, depending on how much light was exposed to them. The camera's brains would then build the image from this collected data. A histogram would then have 16 bins along the graph, one for each shade. If there are no pixels of a given shade, this bin would remain empty, whereas the more of that one shade, the fuller the bin would get. Now if there's an even spread of the 16 shades, it would be a perfectly flat histogram. Whereas if there was more of the middle shades compared to the darker and brighter shades, it would be more like a bell curve. If there was only one shade, they would all sit in that one bin. Whereas if there were 3 different shades, they would only sit in those 3 separate bins, and all the others would stay empty. On a modern day camera, there are just many more bins along the bottom. To be precise, for an 8-bit RGB image, there are 256 shades for each of the 3 colors, red, green, and blue. Some cameras will break it down into a red, green, and blue graph, and some will combine all of these into an overall graph. There are no figures on the graph as it is proportional. What this means is that if the graph is spread out over the whole range, that means that 100% of your pixels are spread out over that range. Whereas if there are only one color, 100% would just be in a tall line. To keep it proportional, that line would stay small. Now to equate this into a good image takes time and experience. Some people say you need a good spread on your histogram, a nice little curve in the middle, but that's not always the case. Say for instance, if most of the pixels in your image are black, but your subject is really well lit, if you just went off your histogram, it would be bunched all the way to the left, and if you just looked at the histogram, you may think it was a bad image. On the other hand, if the majority of the pixels were bunched all the way to the right, it may look like you've overexposed your shot. But if you're going for a high key image, this would be perfectly fine. One thing you can use your histogram for is to protect your highlights or to make sure you're not losing any details in your shadows. So if you have a well-lit scene where there's lots of different colors and lots of different shades, say like a well-lit landscape, you just need to make sure your histogram isn't bunched to the right or to the left. If it is bunched to the right, chances are your highlights might be blown out, especially if it's squashed to the right. And the same on the other side. If it's squashed to the left, what you'll find is you'll start losing detail in your shadows. So if you have a well-lit scene, just try and make sure all your pixels are spread out over the middle of the image. So a histogram is a tool to help you with your exposure and can help you see what is going on in the image, but shouldn't be completely relied on. I use it to make sure my highlights aren't blown out and to make sure I'm not underexposing my shot, especially when I have the brightness on the back of my camera on the screen turned right up. This can sometimes make you underexpose the image a little bit. So I'll frame up my shot, I'll see if it's all right, and then sometimes I'll just check my histogram to make sure I haven't blown out my highlights or I haven't crushed my shadows. Now, do you use histograms? If you do, let me know in the comments below. It'll be great to hear how you get on with them. To watch a quick video on what an exposure is, click on this next video here. And to learn more about histograms and another exposure tool called zebras, click on this video down here. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for weekly videos on photography every Monday and Thursday. I'll see you next time.